Hey guys, tonight we drift back to a morning in 1450, where you're knee-deep in mud that smells like wet pennies and promises. Not metaphorically, actually knee-deep, because the Aztecs didn't believe in paved walkways for their floating gardeners. Your sandals, if you're lucky enough to have them, suction into the muck of Lake Texcoco with every step, and the dawn mist hangs so thick you could chew it. Somewhere beyond the haze, a heron lets out a croak that sounds suspiciously like a critique of your basket-weaving skills. Let's get one thing straight, you probably wouldn't last an hour here. Not because of the back-breaking labor, though, yes, that, but because navigating these gardens required understanding water politics sharper than an obsidian hoe. One wrong move diverting irrigation channels, and suddenly your neighbor's tomato plot floods while your maize withers, a surefire way to end up in the accidental canoe capsize column of the local gossip scrolls. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with your location and local time. Let's see who's listening from a cozy bed in Oslo or a hammock in Oaxaca while we wade through this muck together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge along the chinampas edge, the lake water lapping at your calves like a persistent salesperson. These floating gardens aren't really floating, of course. That's just what the conquistadors called them centuries later when they realized magic dirt islands sounded better in their travel blogs. What you're standing on is a meticulous lattice of willow roots, lake sediment, and rotting vegetation, all lashed together with reeds and the sheer spite of human ingenuity. The Aztecs built these plots to feed a city of 200,000 in a valley with no fertile soil, which is roughly like opening a 5-star restaurant in a parking garage. Your first task today? Hauling baskets of tepitate, a volcanic clay that acts like ancient miracle grow, from the lakebed to shore up the garden's edges. As you scoop, you notice something glinting in the muck, a shattered obsidian blade, probably lost by a gardener who got too enthusiastic about pruning squash vines. Historians still argue whether these blades were ritual offerings or just the Bronze Age equivalent of losing your car keys. Overhead, a heron swoops low, its shadow rippling across the water. These birds were the unofficial mascots of the chinampas, though not in a cute, Disney way. More in a, if I catch you stealing my fish, I'll peck your eyes out, way. Local lore claimed they carried messages between farmers and the rain god Tlaloc, but right now, this one seems focused on judging your posture. By mid-morning, the mist burns off to reveal the true scale of the gardens, a patchwork of green and gold stretching to the horizon, laced with canals where canoes glide like water striders. The air hums with the kind of humidity that makes your tunic cling to you like a jealous lover. You're not just growing food here, you're engineering an ecosystem. Fish dart between the roots, fertilizing the soil. Ducks paddle in orderly squadrons, their poop so prized for flower cultivation that stealing it could get you sentenced to weed the emperor's personal water lilies. A shout echoes from the next plot over. Your neighbor, a grizzled gardener named Quatley, is knee-deep in his own battle with an irrigation channel. He's using a huicle, a wooden digging stick, to redirect water, but the current keeps undoing his work. The lake is moodier than my wife during a Venus retrograde, he grumbles, wiping sweat with a forearm that's probably 60% mosquito bites. You nod sympathetically, though you're distracted by the priest approaching from the causeway. His cloak bristles with quetzal feathers, and he's carrying a basket of corn kernels dyed blood red. Time for the daily soil blessing. Out come the crocodile dung, excellent for pH balance, powdered jade, for vibrancy, or so they claim, and a chant about the earth goddess Quatlique that sounds suspiciously like a recipe for tamales. As the priest tosses kernels into your plot, 1 for the gods, 2 for the worms, you spot a water snake slithering into the reeds. The Aztecs revered these creatures as symbols of rebirth, but you're pretty sure this one's just after your lunch. By sunset, your lower back feels like it's been used as a tlacklie ball, and your hands are raw from hauling reeds. But as you wash off in the lake, watching fireflies blink above the water, you realize something. This isn't just farming. It's a slow, muddy dance with nature, one where every scoop of dirt and duck poop keeps Tenochtitlan's belly full and its temples blooming. The swamp doesn't care about your empire. It gurgles. It belches methane. It swallows sandals whole and laughs with a sound like frogs vomiting. But here you are, ankle-deep in its spite, because the Aztecs didn't just conquer land, they invented it. Brick by squelching brick. Your calloused hands grip another basket of muck, the slop inside smelling like a compost heap's diary. This is the raw material of empire, lake bed sediment, decaying water lilies, and the occasional fish skeleton that got too ambitious. The chinampas didn't happen, they were wrung from the swamp by people who looked at a mosquito-infested marsh and said, yes, let's grow enough corn here to feed a metropolis. It's the agricultural equivalent of turning a junkyard into a symphony hall using only spoons. You're building a new plot today. Step 1. Stake out a rectangle in the shallows with willow branches. Not just any willows, these are ahujotes, their roots genetically predisposed to tolerate more water than a caffeinated duck. As you lash the posts together with reeds, you muse that this is the IKEA furniture of the ancient world. Some assembly required. Batteries not included. Souls of sacrificed warriors optional, though historians still argue whether those skulls found under Plot 42B were ceremonial or just really bad Yelp reviews. Now comes the messy part. For the next 6 hours, you'll dredge the lake bed with a heuicely, heaving sludge into your basket until your spine whimpers. Each load gets layered into the willow frame. Mud, then aquatic plants, then more mud, like a lasagna designed by a deranged swamp god. By sunset, your plot will rise a proud 2 feet above the waterline, a soggy monument to human stubbornness. A canoe glides past, piled high with squawking turkeys destined for some noble's feast. The paddler sneers at your fledgling chinampa. Call that a garden? My grandmother's corpse has better drainage. Ah, the timeless art of agricultural trash talk. You retaliate by accidentally flicking a clump of mud his way. It plops into the water, just shy of his cargo. The unspoken rule of chinampa construction: never let someone else's canoe get between you and your right to petty revenge. But why go through all this trouble? Because Tenochtitlan sits on a lake with soil about as fertile as a brick. The Aztecs' real genius wasn't their pyramids or their calendar, it was realizing you could manufacture farmland. While Europeans were still arguing about whether turnips caused sin, these engineers turned 30,000 acres of useless wetland into a breadbasket that yielded up to 7 crops a year. Take that, medieval crop rotation. Of course, not everything goes according to plan. As you pat down the latest layer of muck, something moves beneath your palm. You freeze. The mud bubbles. A pair of beady eyes surfaces, followed by the unmistakable snout of a crocodile. Not a metaphor. An actual crocodile, lounging in the one spot where you didn't want a reptile Airbnb. Your co-worker, Itztli, leans on her shovel. That's Tlaaltecutli's blessing, she says, referring to the earth monster deity who apparently enjoys gator-themed surprises. Leave him be. He'll eat the rats. You side-eye the creature, now sunning itself on your half-built plot like a scaly squatter. Fine. But if he so much as glances at your lunch bundle. By midday, the plot's taking shape. Willow roots snake into the water, anchoring your creation. Dragonflies dart between cattails, their iridescent wings catching the light like misplaced jewelry. You've even managed to evict the crocodile, bribed with a fish head, because even deities have their price. But the real test comes tomorrow, when you'll plant the first crop, probably wasntel, a spinach-like green that tastes like victory and slightly bitter herbs. As you rinse off in the lake, a bureaucrat in a feathered headdress arrives to assess your work. He prods the soil with a jade-tipped rod, mutters about substandard silt ratios, and demands a bribe of dried chilies to approve the plot. Classic. Some things never change: taxes, death, and middle management corruption. You hand over the peppers. He stamps your clay permit tablet. The swamp, now slightly less swampy, gurgles its approval. Or maybe that's your stomach. Either way, you've just expanded the empire's larder by 200 square feet. Not bad for a day's work. The priest returns at dawn. This time, he's brought friends. 3 acolytes trail behind him, struggling under baskets that smell like a zoo's laundry hamper. One carries a mortar and pestle big enough to grind a small child's hopes. Another clutches a jade figurine with a chipped nose. The third just looks deeply resigned, as if he'd rather be anywhere else. Say, a nice war zone, perhaps. You're elbow deep in soil that's technically soil, though it currently resembles chocolate pudding left in the sun. The priest, Zipili he's called, which either means jeweled prince or one who talks to dirt, depending on who's translating, nods at your plot like a chef inspecting a questionable stew. His feather headdress sways in the breeze, each iridescent quill whispering secrets about your farming skills. Or maybe that's the sleep deprivation talking. The earth hungers, Zipili declares, squatting to sift a handful of dirt through his fingers. His tone suggests the ground might also be judging your life choices. We must feed it properly. The first acolyte dumps his basket. Out rolls a lump of crocodile dung the size of a sleeping dog. You recoil, but the priest beams like it's his firstborn. Ah! Sepakli's gift, he croons, referring to the primordial crocodile deity. Nothing balances soil pH like the excrement of aquatic reptiles. Science. Historians still argue whether these rituals were symbolic theater or agronomical genius. Modern soil tests show Aztec chinampa earth had near-perfect nitrogen levels, so maybe the gods were into scatological chemistry. Either way, you're about to get intimate with a shovel and several pounds of predator poop. The ritual begins with a chant. Zipili's voice rises and falls like a drunk owl, invoking Tlaloc's rain and Chicomcoatl's corn. The acolytes circle your plot, sprinkling crushed jade dust that glints like fairy vomit. For vitality. Zipili explains, though you suspect the jade's main purpose is to remind everyone this ceremony isn't cheap. Next comes the dung. You're handed a wooden paddle to spread the crocodile leavings across the soil. The texture is spongy. The scent is philosophical. Think of it as spa treatment for the earth, Zipili says, watching you gag. Exfoliates the worms. As you work, the priest produces a clay jar filled with corn kernels dyed indigo. Count these, he orders, dumping them into your palm. Exactly 144. One for each day the maize must grow. You start tallying, but the kernels stick to your sweaty fingers. 16, 17. Wait, did you double count that one? Zipili sighs. The previous gardener could do this blindfolded. Historical footnote, that gardener later became a human sacrifice. Coincidence? The quirky bit. Rumor says Zipili once sneezed during a counting ritual and accidentally blessed a farmer's plot with 143 kernels. The result? A cornstalk so tall it blocked sunlight to the emperor's bathhouse. The punishment? 3 weeks weeding the priest's herb garden. True or not, you count twice. Mid-ritual, a breeze carries the tang of burning copal from a neighboring plot. The smoke curls into shapes, a serpent, a ear of corn, a rather suggestive squash, as Zipili launches into the hymn of the patient earthworm. It's a real toe tapper, assuming your toes enjoy dirges about invertebrate digestion. But here's the scholarly debate. Modern agronomists found traces of Enterococcus bacteria in chinampa soil samples. Harmless, but the discovery sparked a century of academic bickering. Was the dung ritual a deliberate microbial seeding technique? Or did the Aztecs just really love crocodiles? Zipili, if asked, would probably wink and sacrifice a squirrel. By noon, the ceremony concludes. Your plot now boasts crocodile dung, jade dust, and exactly 144 corn kernels, you hope. Zipili pats your shoulder, leaving a jade-tinged handprint. The gods are pleased, he says. Probably. As he leaves, a duck waddles onto your plot and pecks at the dung. You consider stopping it, but hey, if the priest gets mad, you'll blame the duck. Your sandal squelches into mud still warm from yesterday's ritual. The crocodile dung has settled, the jade dust has been sneezed away by ducks, and now reality arrives in the form of a tax collector. His name is Yalotli, heart of the road, which sounds poetic until you realize it means he's here to extract your livelihood like a stubborn molar. You're a gardener tracker now. Not by choice. The empire's insatiable bean counters need someone to document every sprout, tally every squash, and explain why Plot 7's corn yield dropped 2% last season. Your tools. A bark paper ledger, a quill made from a turkey's ego, and a water clock that drips faster than your will to live. The day starts before dawn. You crouch by the Ahuapitsackli, a clay water clock shaped like a grumpy frog. Its stone plug leaks seconds into a basin, each drip marking time like a metronome for ants. The Aztecs divided daylight into 20 hours, but yours feel 40% longer thanks to the bureaucracy. Historians still argue whether these clocks were accurate or just psychological torture devices. You're leaning toward the latter. First task, inspect the maze. You wade through plots, counting stalks and noting discolored leaves. The empire demands precise records, not just for taxes, but to predict which farmers might soon be volunteering as sacrificial lottery winners. You pause at Quatli's plot, where the corn looks suspiciously robust. Special compost, he grins, patting a sack that definitely contains contraband duck droppings. You pretend not to notice. Snitches get sacrificed. By mid-morning, you're auditing squash. The Ayacatli vines sprawl like drunken starfish, their fruits bulging under leaves. The tax code is merciless. Any squash shorter than your forearm gets classified as child's plaything and taxed at half rate. You've seen farmers use hot stones to stretch gourds overnight. One guy tried inflating them with reed pipes. It worked until a squirrel chewed through a vine and rocketed across the lake like a vegetable missile. Yalatli arrives as you're measuring a particularly phallic squash. His tunic screams mid-level bureaucrat, indigo dye, jade beads, and a clipboard sharper than an obsidian blade. Report, he demands, snapping fingers that VE never touched dirt. You hand over the ledger. His eyes scan your chicken scratch glyphs. Plot 12's amaranth yield is down. Explain. You cough. Unexpected turtle activity? He glares. The truth. Plot 12's owner, a widow named Atsi, diverted half her crop to feed orphans. But Yalatli doesn't care about orphans. He cares about quotas. You invent a story about experimental crop rotation and promise extra beans next season. He marks your ledger with a glyph that roughly translates to, I'm watching you, dirtworm. The quirky bit comes at noon. To appease Yalatli, you take him to the floating market, a maze of canoes piled with pumpkins, cochineal beetles, and gossip. Vendors here trade insults like currency. Your squash looks like my grandmother's knees, hoots a tomato seller. Your tomatoes look like my grandmother's knees, retorts a squash vendor. It's the ancient version of a roasting session. You buy Yalatli a Pazali drink, fermented maize gruel that tastes like a sourdough starter's midlife crisis. He loosens up, boasting about his nephew's promotion to featherbearer for the emperor. You nod, plotting how to lose his ledger in the lake. But then, disaster. A canoe overloaded with chilies collides with a flower barge. The canal erupts in red and yellow, drifting petals and pepperflakes forming a salsa of shame. Yalatli sneezes violently, his clipboard flipping into the water. You dive after it, not out of loyalty, but because drowning a bureaucrat would require so much paperwork. The ledger's ruined. The water clock's dripping into twilight. Yalatli, now soggy and defeated, mutters about alternative assessment methodologies, bribes. You hand him a sack of chia seeds, the ancient world's Bitcoin, and he vanishes into the dusk. As fireflies rise, you realize something. The Aztec Empire ran on this dance of quotas and quips, threats and chia. It's exhausting. It's absurd. But somehow, it grows. Let's talk about poop. Specifically, duck poop. Because in Tenochtitlan, this isn't waste, it's currency. The kind that makes florists swoon, farmers scheme, and emperors quietly invest in waterfowl security. You're crouched behind a stand of cattails, clutching an empty basket and a bad life choice. Moonlight slicks the canals of Xochimilco, turning the water into quicksilver. Somewhere ahead, guarded by a canoe full of armed Paktika traders, lies the motherlode, a floating duck pen where the birds dine on algae, insects, and the shattered dreams of rival fertilizer smugglers. The ducks honk obliviously. You've heard their droppings contain a secret ingredient that makes flowers bloom with unnatural vigor, a rumor so potent, it spawned an underground market denser than the lake's mud. The elite florists of Tenochtitlan's temples pay triple for Xochimilco gold, and you're here to collect. But first, you need to avoid the guards. Your informant, a grizzled fisherman named Codal, insisted tonight's shift would be light. They'll all be drunk on pulque, he'd said, conveniently forgetting to mention the guard's pet, its squintly dogs. One snarls in your direction now, its eyes glowing like cursed embers. You freeze, suddenly aware that your disguise, a reedy cloak meant to mimic swamp grass, makes you look less like foliage and more like a shaggy monster. The Aztecs didn't invent capitalism, but they perfected its stinky cousin. Ducks, those unwitting alchemists, transformed their meals into nitrogen-rich pellets that turned marigolds into suns and dahlias into fireworks. But the best ponds belonged to Moctezuma's royal gardens, patrolled by guards who'd sooner feed you to the ducks than let you skim their precious poop. Historians still argue whether the black market was a genuine criminal enterprise or just farmers being farmers. Recent digs uncovered clay tablets with coded glyphs that might be poop prices, or someone's grocery list. Either way, you're about to find out. You toss a fish head into the water. It squintly hesitates, then paddles after it with the grace of a drunk otter. Clear path. You slide into the shallows, the water lukewarm and alive with tadpoles. The duck pen looms, a thatched raft where 100 mallards sleep in a feathery heap. Beneath them, the jackpot. Scooping quickly, you fill your basket with still warm droppings. The smell is a punchline waiting to happen. Like fermented cornmeal wrapped in wet dog, Codal had warned. He undersold it. Suddenly, voices. A guard's canoe rounds the bend, torchlight licking the water. You duck under the pen, basket held overhead like a very aromatic umbrella. A duck stirs, peering down at you with the judgmental stare of a creature that knows it's the real economic powerhouse here. Someone's been at the south pen again, grumbles a guard. Found a sandal in the muck. Probably that florist from Tlatelolco, replies another. I say we stake him out for the eagles. You stop breathing. The ducks, perhaps sensing your panic, begin to quack. Not the gentle good evening quack, the full-throated intruder alert fanfare. Torchlight sweeps the water. Then, a splash. A fish leaps. The guards pivot, giving you half a heartbeat to sink into the murk. You're a shadow now, a basket of contraband poop your only friend. The canoe drifts past, so close you could count the lice in the guard's braid. Once they're gone, you emerge, algae in your hair and dignity in tatters. But the basket's full. You paddle home using a stolen tortilla as an oar, don't ask, the stars winking like accomplices. At dawn, you meet your buyer in the flower district. Xochitl, a florist whose face tattoos mark her as a supplier to the Great Temple, inspects your haul. She crumbles a dung pellet between fingers ringed with jade. Decent, she sniffs. But last week's batch had better texture. You scowl. The ducks were stressed. There was a dog. She rolls her eyes, tossing you a pouch of cacao beans. Next time, get the ones from the emperor's sacred ducks. Their poop has divine fiber. As you leave, you spot Quatley haggling with another florist. His basket overflows with suspiciously glossy droppings. He catches your eye and taps his nose, the universal sign for, I know a guy who knows a duck. But here's the twist. Archaeologists found traces of ground oyster shells in elite garden soil. Some scholars think florists added it to enhance their black market poop, creating a premium blend. Others argue it was just bad shellfish disposal. Either way, the ducks remain blissfully unaware of their legacy. You pocket your cacao, already plotting the next heist. Maybe you'll bribe the guards with chili-laced fish heads. Maybe you'll train a heron to distract the dogs. Or maybe you'll finally take up that apprenticeship in pottery. Nah, where's the fun in that? The marigolds are watching. They always are. Their orange faces tilt toward the sun like tiny, judgmental suns themselves, tracking your every move. You've spent months nurturing these sempoalxicoidal blooms for the festival of the sun, and now, with days to go, paranoia sets in. Because in Tenochtitlan, floral glory isn't just prestige, it's a survival tactic. Lose the competition, and you might find yourself reassigned to the volunteer, brigade cleaning jaguar pens at the zoo. You're inspecting petals at dawn when you spot it, a single aphid clinging to a leaf like a tiny, sap-sucking spy. Your gut says sabotage. Last week, old Istley's prize dahlias got infested with beetles after a mysterious canoe dumped rotten fruit upstream. The week before, someone salted the soil of Plot 9, leaving their sunflowers crumpled like discarded tortillas. This isn't gardening anymore. It's horticultural warfare, and the only rule is, don't get caught. The Festival of the Sun demands perfect marigolds, petals as vibrant as molten copper, stems sturdy enough to shame a warrior. Winners supply the temples, losers supply the compost heap. You've already caught your neighbor, a weaselly gardener named Tlenexley, lurking near your plot with a pouch of medicinal herbs that smelled suspiciously like crushed spider mites. Historians still argue whether these rivalries were playful pranks or full-blown agricultural espionage. One clay fragment mentions a gardener who trained squirrels to steal rival seedlings, while another describes a curse involving fermented avocado pits. Either way, you're taking no chances. You deploy your first defense, chili powder. A light dusting around the plot's perimeter, because nothing deters aphids, or aphid-toting rivals, like the threat of involuntary salsa. Next, you string up tsitsimitl dolls, crude figures made of corn husks and owl feathers, to scare off evil spirits. Or, more accurately, to scare Tlenexley. He's notoriously superstitious, ever since he swore a water spirit stole his favorite hoe. But the true genius is the decoy marigolds. You've planted a row of scraggly blooms near the canal, visible to passers-by, while hiding the championship specimens behind a curtain of squash vines. It's the ancient version of a fake safe. Mid-morning, a commotion erupts at Plot 12. Atsy, the widow, is chasing a teenager with a gourd of what looks like liquid fire. "He tried to pour chili agua on my seedlings," she hollers, brandishing a digging stick. The kid sprints away, clutching his now-smoking sandal. You make a mental note to add habanero extract to your anti-sabotage arsenal. By noon, the heat's so thick you could slice it with an obsidian blade. You're patrolling your plot when a familiar stench hits, fermenting fish guts. Tlenexley's signature scent. You follow your nose to find him crouched by your decoy marigolds, sprinkling a suspicious green powder. Blessing the soil, he claims, though the powder's emitting a haze that's probably illegal in 3 city-states. "Funny," you say, stepping closer. "I bless your plot the same way yesterday." You hold up an identical pouch, pilfered from his canoe during the poop heist. Some habits die hard. His face pales. The powder? Crushed malva leaves, harmless, but excellent for sparking paranoia. That night, you camp by your marigolds, chewing chia seeds and listening to frogs belch. Moonlight paints the canals silver, and somewhere, an owl hoots the melody of impending mischief. You've rigged a tripwire of snail shells around your real blooms. Let Tlenexley try sneaking past that. But the attack comes from above. A shadow looms, a gardener gliding down the canal on a raft, a blowgun poised at his lips. Before you can react, he fires. A clay pellet hits your decoy marigolds, bursting into a cloud of glittery pollen. The flowers wilt instantly. Genius. The glitter. Ground mica. The poison. Nightshade extract. The audacity. Unmatched. You leap into your canoe, paddling furiously. The saboteur flees, but not before you recognize his arm tattoos, a telltale sign of the Flower Guild's enforcers. Of course. The temples want to ensure their own marigolds win, even if it means playing dirty. The scholarly debate here is delicious. Some argue guild sabotage was a myth perpetuated by sore losers. Others cite buried texts describing flower spies, trained in stealth botany. You're just glad you hid the good plants. By dawn, the decoys are dead, but your hidden marigolds glow like captured sunlight. Tlenexley stops by, pretending to admire the carnage. "Such a shame," he sighs, eyeing the wilted blooms. You hand him a tamale stuffed with extra chili. "Eat up," you smile. "It's blessed." As the festival approaches, you realize something. These shenanigans aren't just petty rivalry. They're proof the Aztecs understood Flora's power, that beauty, like empire, requires both nurture and a little strategic chaos. The marigold drama fades like a bad dream, replaced by a new nightmare: paperwork. Sacred paperwork. Because in Aztec agriculture, you don't just plant maize, you negotiate with gods, bureaucrats, and a scribe named Mahuizo who's allergic to step 7. You stand in a field that's not yet a field, just a rectangle of dirt that smells like crocodile dung and unmet expectations. The 13-step maize blessing ceremony begins at dawn, which is why you've been here since midnight untangling ceremonial ribbons. Each ribbon represents a different god, and by the look of these knots, the deities are very conflicted about your life choices. First to arrive is the priest, Zipili, looking even more feather-bedecked than usual. His cloak today features embroidered corn husks that rustle like a disapproving librarian. Behind him shuffles Mahuizo, the scribe, clutching a bark paper codex and the energy of a man who's mastered the art of selective hearing. You've heard the stories. Mahuizo once documented a solar eclipse as "sun got shy," and his version of the creation myth includes a footnote about a really good taco stand. The ceremony's steps are set in stone, much like the temple sacrifices, but with more hand gestures. Step 1. Invoke Cintiatl, the maize god, with a chant that sounds like a yodeling contest. Step 2. Scatter jade dust in the shape of a cornstalk. Step 3. Release a captive quail as a symbolic gift to the soil. The quail, unaware it's symbolic, immediately flies into a tree and starts heckling. You're on step 4, burning a lock of hair from a virgin, yours, reluctantly donated, mixed with crushed obsidian, when Mahuizo's quill pauses. "Wait," he mutters, squinting at his codex. "Did we do the thing with the frog?" Zipili freezes. "Which frog?" "The ceremonial frog." Step 7. A beat of silence. The priest's eye twitches. "Mahuizo." "Yes. We're on step 4. "Right. Just checking." This is why everyone dreads Mahuizo. 2 plantings ago, he forgot to record the blessing of the eastern winds, resulting in a maize crop so puny the tax collectors wept. Last season, he skipped the dance of the fertile earthworm, and farmers swear their stalks grew sideways out of spite. Step 5. Bury a jade bead at each corner of the field. You're on your knees digging when a shadow looms, Yalotli, the tax collector, here to assess the ceremony's fiscal piety. He sniffs. "That bead looks undersized." "It's metaphorical, you lie." "Metaphors don't feed the empire," he retorts, jotting a note that probably says, "Audit this peasant." By step 6, a recitation of the maize god's 200 aliases, you're sweating through your tunic. Zipili chants names like "He who rolls in the dirt" and "Lord of the suspiciously plump kernel," while Mahuizo doodles a rather accurate caricature of Yalotli in the margin. Then comes the moment everyone fears. Step 7. Zipili announces, flinging cornmeal into the air. "The rite of the amphibian's blessing." Mahuizo blanches. "Ah, yes. The frog." You all stare at the empty clay bowl where the ceremonial frog should be. The scribe coughs. "I thought we were using a symbolic frog this year?" Zipili's feathers tremble. The frog isn't symbolic. The frog is literal. The quirky twist. The rite involves rubbing a live frog on the soil to invite rain. But Mahuizo, in his eternal wisdom, released the frog earlier, mistaking it for the quail. The creature now sits in the tree, ribbiting smugly. Yalotli folds his arms. "Can't you substitute something?" "A rock. A particularly ugly squash." Zipili looks ready to combust. "This isn't a market negotiation. The gods demand." "What about that?" You point to a frog-shaped mudclod. The priest hesitates. The scribe brightens. The tax collector shrugs. "Looks froggy enough." And that's how you end up rubbing a dirt clump on the field while Mahuizo chants, "Oh great Cintiatl, please ignore the substandard amphibian. We'll do better next time." Probably. Steps 8 through 13 pass in a blur. More chants, more cornmeal, more side-eye from the quail. As the ceremony concludes, Zipili mutters a prayer that's 10% gratitude, 90%, "Please don't smite us." But here's the kicker. Historians still argue whether these rituals were vital or just bureaucratic theater. Excavations near Lake Texcoco revealed fields where Step 7 was consistently skipped, and their yields were above average. Some scholars claim the forgotten step was a secret resistance against priestly overreach. Others insist Mahuizo had a drinking problem. As the party disperses, you spot the real frog hopping into the canal, free as a bird and twice as smug. You toss it a corn kernel. Next time, you whisper, negotiate a better contract. The canal narrows. Your canoe slows. Ahead, the floating market blooms like a chaotic water lily, its tendrils of commerce snaking through every inlet. 200 boats jostle for space, piled with pumpkins, feathers, and the sharp tongues of vendors who've honed insults into an art form. Welcome to retail therapy, Aztec style. You paddle into the fray, your canoe laden with squash that took 3 moons to grow and 3 seconds for your neighbor to call embarrassingly petite. The rules here are unwritten but binding. Yield to priests, flip off tax collectors, and never, never comment on the size of someone's gourd unless you're ready to throw hands or corn. First stop, the tomato exchange. A weathered vendor named Pozole eyes your cargo. 3 squash for 1 basket of zytomatl, she declares, arms crossed like a human balance scale. You scoff. 3. Last week it was 2. She shrugs. Inflation. Blame the drought. Historians still argue whether Aztec markets had fixed exchange rates or just vibes. The answer? Vibes. Definitely vibes. You haggle her down to 2 squash and a handful of chia seeds, the ancient equivalent of tossing in free fries. As she loads tomatoes into your canoe, she nods at your remaining produce. Selling those. You glance at your squash. They're artisanal. She snorts. Artisanal? They look like my ex-husband's knees. The market thrums around you. A canoe stacked with live turkeys drifts by, the birds gobbling a funeral dirge. A feather merchant haggles with a sandal maker over quetzal plumes, their debate peppered with creative slurs about each other's mothers. You're pretty sure your mother farms like a blind axolotl is illegal in 4 city-states. Suddenly, a collision. A chilly trader rams into your stern, sending tomatoes rolling like fugitives. Watch it, mud feet, he barks, though the real offense is his hat, a dried pumpkin carved into the likeness of Tlaloc, rain god and noted chili hater. You retaliate with the ultimate Aztec burn. Nice hat. Did your toddler make it? Gasps ripple through nearby canoes. The chilly trader turns the color of his cargo. But before he can counter, a new voice cuts in. You. It's Istley, the flower saboteur from last moon's marigold debacle. Her canoe brims with suspiciously vibrant dahlias, no doubt fertilized with borrowed duck droppings. She holds up a lily. Trade you this for a squash. It's blessed by Xochiquetzal herself. You eye the flower. Blessed or cursed? She grins. Depends on your definition of interesting times. The scholarly debate here? Anthropologists found chili seeds in flower gardens, suggesting either cross-market camaraderie or a really confused gardener. You decline Istley's offer but pocket a petal for research. As midday heat swelters, traffic grinds to a standstill. Canoes cram the canal like beads on a necklace, their owners shouting suggestions that would make a sailor blush. A fishmonger tries to cut ahead, claiming his mackerel are on a divine timetable. A grandmother selling amaranth candy threatens to beat him with her paddle. You, meanwhile, spot a loophole, a side channel blocked by a ceremonial use only banner. You're basically ceremonial. Gliding through the forbidden shortcut, you emerge near the pottery stalls. A vendor waves you over, his wares glazed in colors stolen from the sunset. You. Yes, you, the one who looks like a drowned armadillo. Buy a bowl for your pathetic squash. You're insulted, but also impressed. His pitch is airtight. As you haggle, a familiar face floats by, Yalotli, the tax collector, scribbling notes on a bark paper ledger. He spots your squash and smirks. Still growing those? You lob a tomato at his canoe. It misses, splattering a passing priest's robe with seeds. The priest glares. Yalotli cackles. The tomato, now a martyr, sinks into the murk. By dusk, you've traded all but one squash, the runt of the litter, too lumpy even for insults. You're about to abandon it when a child paddles up, her canoe piled with snail shells. "Trade?" she asks, holding out a shell carved into a tiny frog. You hand over the squash. "Deal." As you leave, the market's din fades into frog song. That's the thing about Aztec commerce. Beneath the barbs and chaos, it's just people floating through life, trading pieces of their world. Even the ugly squash find homes. The moon hangs low, fat and yellow as a cornmeal cake, as you paddle home from the market. Villagers huddle around cooking fires along the shore, their voices carrying across the water like secrets. "And then he licked it," someone says, followed by a chorus of gasps. You slow your canoe, ears pricked. Ah, yes, it's that story again. You beach your canoe just as the storyteller reaches the good part. The great drought of 6 Rabbit, when the rains hid like cowardly jaguars. Crops withered. Babies wailed. Priests sacrificed so many voles, the owls filed a complaint. Then came Tlotzen, the blind elder who could taste the future on his tongue. The crowd leans in. You join them, crunching on a stolen pumpkin seed. Tlotzen, the storyteller continues, would wade into the shallows at midnight, his staff tapping the mud like a disapproving god. He'd scoop up a tadpole, always a tadpole, and let it wriggle across his palm. Then, he'd lick it. A child squeals. A grandmother mutters, "That's how you get the belly squirts." By dawn, the storyteller whispers, Tlotzen would declare if rain would come. And come it did. 7 times out of 10. Maybe 6. The crowd disperses, half convinced. You linger, because let's face it, you're desperate. Your maize is wilting, the tax collector's looming, and at this point, you'd lick a tadpole too. Historians still argue whether Tlotzen existed or was just a metaphor for desperate farmers do weird stuff. But clay fragments mention a blind rain caller in the Codex of Whispers, real name, the ledger of things we don't tell the priests. Modern scholars suggest he detected humidity shifts via the tadpole's mucus, an early weather app, if you will. You decide to test the legend. Midnight finds you knee-deep in a pond that smells like frog regrets. Tadpoles dart between your toes, their gelatinous bodies brushing your skin in a way that makes you question all your life choices. You scoop one up. It squirms, its tiny eyes accusing. "This is for science," you whisper, then lick it. The taste. Pond. Just pond. A flavor profile best described as wet rock after a long cry. Nothing happens. You try another. And another. By the 5th tadpole, your tongue's numb, and you're pretty sure one of them winked at you. Then, a rumble. Thunder. Or your stomach revolting. A raindrop plinks into the water. Then, another. Soon, the downpour drums against the lake, each drop a tiny victory. You grin, rain slicking your hair, as thunder applauds your questionable choices. Coincidence? Absolutely. But try telling that to your maize. The quirky twist. Rumor says Tlotzen's other methods included sniffing termite mounds and interpreting duck hiccups. A surviving nursery rhyme goes, "Lick the pollywog, count the frog bog, if your tongue turns blue, rain's coming for you." Note, tongues never turned blue. But it rhymed so. As you slog home, a fisherman nods at your drenched state. Tried the tadpole trick, eh? He holds up a wriggling larva. You're supposed to use the left side of the pond. Everyone knows that. You make a mental note to write that down, if you survive the night without a parasite takeover. The flower district doesn't just smell like petals, it smells like vanity. A dozen vendors hawk their blooms under canopies dyed with crushed cochineal beetles, their stalls shimmering with colors that don't exist in nature. But you're not here for roses or dahlias. You're here for the real treasure, snail slime. You sidle up to a vendor named Zoki, whose complexion glows like a moonlit pearl despite her being, by her own admission, older than the first chinampa. Her stall overflows with marigolds, but her bestseller sits in a clay bowl under the counter, a writhing mass of garden snails. "Ah," she croons, plucking one from the pile. "You've come for the secret." The snail oozes across her palm, leaving a trail of mucus that sparkles faintly in the sun. "This," she declares, "is why I look 30 when I'm actually 300. Historians still argue whether Aztec beauty claims were exaggerated or if their snails were just built different. You lean in, skeptical. "You rub snail slime on your face?" Zoki scoffs. "Rub is such a crude word. We anoint." She demonstrates, smearing the glistening trail across her cheek. The mucus of Pantheroids Azteca titans pores, soothes sunburn, and allegedly makes your ex-lovers weep with regret. 2 cacao beans per application. The Aztecs didn't invent skin care, but they perfected the art of convincing people that literal slug trails were luxury. Zoki's clients include priestesses, concubines, and a very nervous bureaucrat who swears the slime cured his beard dandruff. "It didn't," Zoki confides. "But fear is a powerful exfoliant." The quirky twist. These snails feast exclusively on marigold petals, their slime absorbing the flower's golden pigments. When applied, it leaves a subtle shimmer, the ancient world's version of highlighter. You watch a noblewoman purchase a live snail in a jade vial, cooing, "Who's my little mucus prince?" "Does it work?" you ask. Zoki shrugs. "Do I look like I age?" You hand over 2 cacao beans. She dabs slime on your forehead. It's cold. It's sticky. It smells like a pond's skincare routine. But as it dries, your skin tightens in a way that feels expensive. "Now," Zoki says, "for the full ritual." She crushes a lily into paste, mixes it with honey stolen from temple hives, and slathers it over the slime. The snails love this part. They do not. One tries to escape. She pops it back into the bowl. As the mask hardens, she shares gossip between layers. Which priest uses fermented avocado pits for hair growth, bald, which concubine bathes in jaguar milk, allergic, and which flower seller was caught sneaking duck poop into her night cream, everyone knew. Suddenly, a commotion erupts 2 stalls over. Istli, the marigold saboteur, is arguing with a customer. "You said this cream would make me look 20. The woman shouts, her face slathered in green goop. "It does." Istli fires back. "From very far away." Zoki shakes her head. "Amateur. Real beauty takes patience. And snails." By midday, your face feels taut as a drum. You catch your reflection in a water jug, glowing, yes, but also slightly sticky. A bee mistakes you for a flower and kamikazes into your cheek. Zoki plucks it out with tweezers made of obsidian. "Complementary extraction," she says. "Come back next week for our leech treatment." But here's the rub. Archaeologists found snail shells in elite burial sites, some coated in gold leaf. Scholars debate whether this was ritualistic or the first documented case of influencer culture. Either way, Zoki's onto something. Your skin hasn't looked this dewy since puberty. As you leave, a rival vendor hisses, "Enjoy your face worms." You flip her a snail. It sails through the air in a perfect, glistening arc. Beauty, you decide, is a battlefield. And you're winning. The moon smirks behind a veil of clouds, its light just bright enough to make bad decisions seem reasonable. You crouch in a stolen canoe, clutching a basket lined with moss, the kind used to smuggle contraband orchids, exotic beetles, and tonight's target, the sacred water lilies of Lake Xochimilco. Moctezuma's bathhouse demands fresh blooms by dawn, and the royal gardeners are not taking "no" for an answer. Your accomplice, a wiry herbalist named Zolan, adjusts his reed camouflage. "Remember," he whispers, "only the white ones. The pink ones give the emperor hives." You nod, though you suspect the hives are less about pollen and more about Moctezuma's habit of blaming Flora for his bad moods. Last month, he banished a fig tree for looking judgmental. The lilies in question grow in a cordoned-off inlet, guarded by a squadron of Quachik, elite warriors whose headdresses double as bird nests. Or so you've heard. Truth is, no one's seen the guards up close and lived to describe them. Rumors say they're trained to kill with lily pads. Historians still argue whether these warriors existed or were just a myth to scare kids away from rare flowers. You paddle closer, the water lapping at the canoe like a gossip hungry for details. Zolan produces a gourd of fermented agave sap. "Distract them," he says, nodding to the guard post, a thatched hut on stilts. You sniff the sap. It reeks of desperation and bad choices. "How?" "Throw it. They'll think it's a gift from the gods. Or they'll think it's sewage." He shrugs. "Gods work in mysterious ways." You lob the gourd. It arcs through the night, landing with a plop near the hut. A guard emerges, sniffs the spill, and promptly starts singing love ballads to a nearby cactus. Zolan's grin widens. "Told you. Sacred brew." The lilies glimmer ahead, their petals glowing like stolen moonlight. Moctezuma's bathhouse allegedly uses them to purify the royal aura, though insiders whisper they're just cover for his crippling pollen addiction. You reach for the first bloom. Squelch. Your hand freezes. The sound came from below. Slowly, you peer over the canoe's edge. A pair of eyes glints in the murk. Then, another. And another. Dozens of axolotls swarm beneath you, their frilled gills fluttering like underwater tutus. One nudges the canoe, its smile disturbingly knowing. "Don't mind them," Zolan hisses. "They're just soulless salamanders. They're staring at me. They're judging you. Now hurry." You pluck the first lily, its stem snapping with a sound like a tiny scream. The axolotls burble. Is that laughter? Halfway through your haul, a new problem arises. The lilies are rooted to the lakebed by cords tougher than a bureaucrat's resolve. Zolan hands you an obsidian knife. Cut them. Cleanly. The emperor hates jagged stems. You saw at a cord. It resists, then snaps, recoiling like a serpent. The water erupts. A net of woven reeds bursts upward, engulfing the canoe. You're hoisted into the air, lilies scattering, axolotls applauding with their weird little hands. "Ah," says a voice below. A guard steps into the moonlight, holding the net's rope. His headdress does, in fact, contain a bird's nest, complete with sleeping sparrow. "We've been expecting you." Zolan sighs. "Told you we should have bribed the axolotls." The guard, whose name tag probably reads Tlacocklecattle, but let's call him Steve, escorts you to the hut. Inside, a ledger lists previous offenders. Year 12 rabbit. Fisherman caught stealing lilies for wedding bouquet. Punishment, wrote apology poem. Year 3 flint. Noblewoman took lily for skincare research. Punishment, donated 3 turkeys. Steve steeples his fingers. "Why?" You glance at Zolan. He coughs. "The emperor's bathhouse." "Lies," Steve says. "Moctezuma's lilies are delivered daily by the Flower Guild. You're clearly amateurs. Pathetic amateurs." The quirky twist. Guards here don't arrest thieves, they recruit them. Turns out, Steve's been short-staffed since his partner retired to breed hairless dogs. "You'll work off your crime," he says, handing you a broom made of cactus spines. "By cleaning the royal lily ponds. Starting now." Dawn finds you waist-deep in muck, scrubbing algae while axolotls critique your technique. Zolan, ever the optimist, pockets a few lily seeds. "Next time," he whispers, "we'll grow our own." Historians still debate whether these heists were real or moral fables. But dig up a noble's bathhouse, and you'll find lily pollen in the oddest places, including a certain emperor's sandal collection. As the sun rises, Steve releases you with a warning. Tell your friends about the axolotls. They love an audience. You paddle home, damp and defeated, but with a newfound respect for amphibians. And Moctezuma's sinuses. The moon swells fat and white, its reflection shattered on the lake's surface like a dropped plate. You shouldn't be out here. No one should. But the new moon crops won't plant themselves, and the canals whisper promises of quiet productivity. Or maybe that's just the wind. Or the ghosts. You pull your canoe through water black as obsidian, the shhhshhh of reeds your only company. By day, these plots bustle with curses and duck droppings. By night, they belong to the ones who never left. The drowned. The forgotten. The gardeners who took eternal soil commitment a tad too literally. Old Quatley warned you about this. They'll ask for help weeding, he'd said, chewing a stalk of bittergrass. Don't answer. Unless you fancy joining their rotational program. You'd laughed then. You're not laughing now. A splash to your left. You freeze. Ripples spread, but there's no fish, no frog, just the silhouette of a canoe gliding ahead, its occupant hunched and hooded. No lantern. No paddle. No sound. Your throat tightens. You've heard the tales. Phantom farmers who till plots that vanished centuries ago, their crops wilted, their hands skeletal. They say if you follow them, you'll wake up knee-deep in mud, your hair full of algae and your pockets full of snail shells. The canoe drifts closer. The figure reaches into the water, pulling up a clump of nothing. It mimes planting, tending, harvesting air. You grip your paddle, torn between fleeing and asking if they need a hand. Quatley's voice in your head. Don't. Historians still argue whether these legends stem from sleep-deprived hallucinations or actual belief in aquatic undead. A recovered codex depicts drowned farmers as servants of Atlahua, god of fishermen, doomed to cultivate celestial algae until the next flood. But the scribe also doodled a duck in a sombrero, so take that with a grain of salt. Your phantom neighbor straightens, hood falling back to reveal a face? Not quite. More like a shadow stretched over bones, eyes hollow as a plundered tomb. It gestures to the empty plot beside your canoe. Help, it seems to say. Help, and I'll teach you the secret of eternal squash. You're seriously considering it. Eternal squash would impress Yolotli, when a familiar voice booms. Oi! Lost. The specter dissolves like mist in a slap. You spin to see Kotal, the fisherman, anchored nearby with a net full of twitching sardines. His grin glints in the moonlight. Saw you chatting with old Metzli. He's a lousy conversationalist, but great at composting. You exhale. That was drowned during the great storm of Seven House. Moaned for weeks about his unfinished pumpkin trellis. Now he haunts rookies. Kotal tosses you a sardine. Eat. Calms the nerves. The fish is raw, salty, and possibly still praying. You chew. Why doesn't he move on? Same reason any of us stick around. Kotal gestures to his nets. Unfinished business. Also, the food's decent. The quirky twist. Locals leave gifts for the ghosts, a handful of cornmeal, a child's clay toy. Last year, a widow tossed her husband's gardening tools into the lake, hoping he'd finally shut up about irrigation. Next dawn, the tools reappeared in her plot, polished and arranged into a glyph that roughly meant, "You're welcome." Kotal rose closer. Want to see something? He dips his oar, stirring bioluminescent algae into glowing swirls. The water lights up, revealing ghostly footprints pacing the lakebed. They're still working, he says. Even in death, quotas wait for no one. You peer down. A spectral hand reaches from the mud, planting seeds that dissolve before they sprout. Another scoops silt into a basket that never fills. It's haunting. It's heartbreaking. It's also kind of motivating. If they're not slacking off, what's your excuse? As dawn pinks the horizon, Kotal departs with a wave. Tell Metzli, I said, hi. You're alone again, but the ghosts have vanished. All that remains is a single water lily on your seat, white, fresh, and definitely not there earlier. You tuck it behind your ear. Maybe the dead aren't so bad. Just horticulturally persistent. The air smells like burnt corn and desperation. You stand in the shadow of the great temple, clutching a basket of maize so pitiful, even the temple squirrels look embarrassed for you. This year's harvest isn't just bad, it's diplomatic incident bad. And Tlaxcala's envoys arrive at sunset. It all started with the rains. Or rather, the lack thereof. The skies held their breath for months, leaving the chinampas parched and the maize stalks stunted as a bureaucrat's ambition. The empire's grain stores dwindled. The Tlaxcalan ambassador, a man named Tizoc who wears his grudges like jade jewelry, had been promised 20,000 bushels as part of the ceasefire treaty. Your current inventory. 6. And that's counting the half-rotten kernels at the bottom of the storage pit. Moctezuma's food steward, a man with the cheerful demeanor of a stepped-on cactus, surveys the haul. Is this a joke? He hisses. You shrug. We could stretch it. Add sawdust. He pinches the bridge of his nose. The Tlaxcalans will declare war. Again. And I'll have to listen to that bard they bring. He only knows one lute song, and it's about how much we suck. Historians still argue whether the drought was natural or Tlaxcalan sabotage. Their spies were notorious for salting fields and releasing aphid swarms. Either way, you're stuck holding the metaphorical tortilla. Enter Atsi, the widow from Plot 12, whose frown lines could store grain for winter. She elbows past the steward, clutching a clay pot. We'll give them this. The steward peers inside. Beans. Not just beans. She plucks a lump from the pot, a masa dumpling stuffed with beans, wrapped in corn husk. Tetlaxcali tlacoyo, she declares. It's fancy. You take a bite. The masa crumbles like a poorly planned treaty, but the bean filling is rich, smoky, and substantial. It's half the corn but twice the filling, Atsi explains. Stretch the grain, fill their bellies, save the peace. Probably. The steward blinks. You invented this today? Invention is the mother of starvation avoidance. The quirky twist. Atsi's recipe was born of sheer panic. With no time to grind enough maize for traditional tortillas, she'd mixed the last kernels with clay pit runoff, don't ask, and mushed beans into the center. The result. A culinary Hail Mary that tasted like hope and mild dysentery. You're drafted into the kitchen army. For the next 6 hours, you mash, stuff, and wrap alongside a battalion of grandmothers who've apparently been waiting their whole lives for this moment. More beans. One barks. Less whimpering. Snaps another. The steward paces, muttering, if this fails, I'm naming all of you in my suicide note. By sunset, the Tlaxcalans arrive. Tizoc sniffs the air like a jaguar scenting weakness. The feast begins. Course 1, tlacoyos piled high with chili-spiked ants. Course 2, tlacoyos floating in turkey broth. Course 3, tlacoyos stuffed with cactus fruit and edible flowers. Distract them with pretty colors, Atsi advised. Tizoc bites into his 5th tlacoyo, bean filling oozing down his wrist. He chews. Slowly. The room holds its breath. Then, a grunt. Interesting texture, he says. Crumbly. Earthy. The steward sweats. It's, artisanal. Handcrafted by our most devout. But where's the maize you promised? Tizoc interrupts, leaning forward. This tastes like beans with regret. Atsi steps forward, her voice steady as a matate. The maize is there. Woven into every bite. Just as Tlaxcala's strength is woven into this alliance. Silence. Then, Tizoc laughs, a deep, rumbling sound that shakes the incense burners. Clever. You Aztecs always have a trick. He pops another tlacoyo whole into his mouth. We'll take the shipment. But next year. More beans. The treaty holds. The steward faints. Atsi becomes the empire's unofficial minister of desperation cuisine. But here's the rub. Archaeologists found bean-stuffed masa balls in pre-Aztec Oaxacan sites. Scholars now debate whether Atsi actually invented the tlacoyo or just pulled a fast one during negotiations. Either way, the lesson stands. When life gives you drought, give it beans and audacity. As you sweep up masa crumbs, a kitchen granny nudges you. Next time, try adding cheese. What's cheese? She winks. Exactly. The ball court echoes with a thud that rattles your molars. 2 teams charge across the Tlaxcala, hips angled like weapons, their padded belts gleaming under the harsh sun. The rubber ball, a dense, bouncy orb that smells like fermented tree blood, arcs toward the stone hoop. Victory here doesn't just mean glory, it means avoiding the post-game volunteer draft for the next sacrifice. No pressure. You're on Team Sapakli, named after the primordial croc demon, which feels appropriate given the guy currently elbowing your ribs. His name is Quetzalcoatl, and he's built like a pyramid with legs. Pass the ball, or I'll wear your intestines as a sash, he growls. Charming. The crowd roars as the ball rockets toward you. You pivot, hips primed, smack, sending it spiraling toward the hoop. The ball grazes the stone ring, bouncing away in a blur. The referee, a priest wearing a jaguar pelt and a permanent sneer, signals, no point. Quetzalcoatl curses in a dead dialect. But here's the thing, this isn't just a game. It's geopolitics with a side of concussions. The current match is a friendly against Tlaxcala, those perennial rivals who still haven't forgiven you for the bean-stuffed masa incident. Their star player, Oatley, winks as he steals the ball. Your mother gardens like a blind axolotl, he taunts. You retaliate by accidentally tripping him into a puddle of ceremonial chocolate. Historians still argue whether the Aztec ballgame was truly a sport or just ritualized combat with better branding. The answer? Yes. But today's match takes a turn when the halftime snack cart rolls in. Oatley saunters to the judge's bench, hauling a pumpkin the size of a toddler. A gift from Tlaxcala, he announces, hefting it onto the table. The gourd's unnaturally smooth, its orange hue so vivid it hurts to look at. The judges lean in, murmuring. One prods it with a dagger. The pumpkin squeaks. Quetzalcoatl grabs your arm. That's not a pumpkin. That's an abomination. He's right. Tlaxcala's shamans have been crossbreeding pumpkins with something, possibly sunflowers, possibly demons, to create these monstrosities. Their flesh is sweeter, their seeds more numerous, and their existence deeply illegal under the Agricultural Purity Act of 5 Rabbit. But the judges, now drooling over sliced samples, don't seem to care. Foul! You shout. They're bribing you with mutant squash. The head judge pauses mid-bite, juice dribbling down his chin. Prove it. You're about to cite the act when Oatley lobs another pumpkin onto the court. It explodes on impact, showering everyone in seeds that immediately sprout tendrils. The crowd screams. Quetzalcoatl swats a vine away from his ankle. Told you. Demons. The scholarly debate here is delicious. Botanists recently found 15th-century pumpkin seeds with genetic anomalies, suggesting selective breeding gone wild. Traditionalists claim it's proof of ancient GMOs, while purists insist it's just vigorous pollination. Either way, Tlaxcala's playing dirty. The match descends into chaos. Players slip on pumpkin guts. Vines snake around the hoop. Oatley, now riding a growing gourd like a particularly deranged canoe, shouts, Tlaxcala forever. The referee declares the game void, which is Aztec for everyone loses. Punishment comes swift. The judges, now nursing stomachaches from their illicit snack, sentence both teams to community service, tending the royal pumpkin patches. For a month. Naked. This is humiliating, Quetzalcoatl grumbles, waist deep in squash blossoms. You shrug. Could be worse. Could be sacrificial altar duty. He side-eyes a vine creeping toward his loincloth. Debatable. But here's the twist, those mutant pumpkins? They're delicious. By week 2, the palace chefs are sneaking into the patch, whipping up pies that make the emperor weep with joy. Soon, Tlaxcala's abominations are the hottest black market item since duck poop. The scandal fades, replaced by a booming underground gourd trade. As you pluck seeds from your hair, you spot Oatley across the patch. He nods, tossing you a contraband slice. You bite into its golden flesh and sigh. Maybe innovation isn't so bad. Even if it's born of cheating, chaos, and mildly demonic horticulture. The sun dies at noon. One moment it's there, blistering and smug. The next, swallowed by the moon's cold mouth. Shadows sharpen into knife edges. The lake stills. A howl rises from the temples, echoing across the chinampas like a god's indigestion. You, however, have a row to finish. It's just a sky burp, you mutter, thrusting your digging stick into the soil. Around you, farmers sprint for shore, their shrieks blending with the honks of disoriented ducks. A priest gallops past on a litter, hurling copal resin into a brazier. Repent. Repent, or we're all tamales. You've seen eclipses before. 3, to be exact. The first time, you were 7, and your mother hid you in a grain jar with a tortilla over your head. The second, your wedding day, bad omen, as it turned out. The third, well, let's just say it explained the divorce. But this is your plot, your maze, and you'll be damned if some celestial snack time ruins your rhythm. Historians still argue whether commoners shared the elite's terror of eclipses or just rolled their eyes and kept farming. Excavated diaries, scratched onto pottery shards, suggest a mix. Sun gone. Again. Yawn. Still weeded. Plot 5. But the priests? Oh, they're loving this. A canoe slams into your chinampa, spilling a trio of nobles in jade bling. Peasant, one gasps, his feather headdress askew. Row us to the temple. We must appease Tonetiuh before he digests us. You gesture to your half-planted row. Busy. He gapes. The world is ending. Your breath is ending. Move. They splutter off, paddling with the grace of concussed axolotls. You resume planting, the rhythm steady. Stab, drop seed, kick dirt. The sky's a sickly green now, the air crisp as a fresh corpse. Bats swoop, confused. Dragonflies crash into your forehead. Somewhere, a dog starts composing its apocalyptic ballad. But here's the thing, your seeds are special. Blessed by a tipsy shaman who swore they'd grow in any light, even hell's. You're pretty sure he just peed on them, but hey, desperate times. A shadow looms. The gardener from Plot 9, Zapili's least favorite nephew, clutches a squawking turkey. We need blood, he pants. Lots of it. Preferably yours. You side-eye the bird. Why not his? He's a sacred turkey. And I'm a sacred gardener. Beat it. He flees. The turkey winks. The scholarly twist. While elites performed mass sacrifices to relight the sun, commoners had quieter rituals. Women buried spindle whorls to weave the sun back. Men urinated in concentric circles, don't ask. You've got seeds to plant and a personal mantra. If the world ends, at least I'll die ahead of schedule. As totality hits, the temperature plummets. Your breath fogs. The maize seed in your palm glows faintly, probably radioactive, but you're committed. Stab, drop, kick. A meteor streaks overhead. Or maybe it's a flaming priest. Hard to tell. Then, whispers. The chinampa shudders. From the water slithers a shape. Part eel, part obsidian nightmare, all teeth. The Tzitzimitl, star demon said to devour the sun. Or maybe it's just a really big salamander with a flair for drama. It hisses, blocking your path. Mortal. Your toil is meaningless. You squint. Are you, my ex-wife? The demon hesitates. I am the end of all things. Yeah, she said that too. You chuck a seed at it. The creature flinches, dissolving into smoke and what smells like burnt tortillas. Ha! Maybe the shaman wasn't full of it. Dawn cracks the horizon, the sun spitting out the moon with a celestial belch. The lake exhales. Farmers creep back, eyeing your untouched plot. How? Someone asks. You shrug. Kept planting. The maize, already sprouting, unfurls leaves as green as envy. The priest's turkey, now missing feathers, glares from a nearby canoe. As the world stumbles back to normal, you wipe sweat, or maybe demon residue, from your brow. The empire may rise or fall, the gods may squabble, but your row is done. The lake sighs into twilight, its surface gilded with the last honeyed streaks of sun. You sit at the edge of your chinampa, toes skimming water that's forgotten today's chaos. The maize sways, a chorus of green whispers, each leaf a testament to stubbornness. Somewhere, a heron croaks the day's final punchline. Breathe in, wet soil, bruised petals, the tang of distant rain. Breathe out, the clench of fear, the itch of deadlines, the metallic aftertaste of Armageddon dodged. The canals soften into liquid shadow, cradling the first stars like stolen beads. You lie back, letting the earth hold you. This plot, this stubborn scrap of reclaimed lake, has outlived kings and eclipses and at least 3 of your ex's dramatic exits. The dirt remembers none of it. It simply is, grounded, patient, nourishing. A firefly blinks above your nose, its light a Morse code even the gods can't decipher. You imagine it saying, "Nice work, kid," or maybe, "Next time, duck faster." Either way, you smile. The night deepens, stitching the sky with constellations the Aztecs named for their dramas. The scorpion who overstayed his welcome, the rabbit in the moon still owed money, the jade skirt draped over a cloud. Their stories hum in the humid air, a lullaby older than empires. Your blisters throb. Your back screams. Your sandals are 80% mud. And yet, there's peace here, in the cricket's creaky symphony, in the distant plop of a frog claiming its throne. The world didn't end. The maze grows. The ducks, those feathered philosophers, glide past with their eternal verdict, meh. You close your eyes. The chinampa rocks you, gentle as a grandmother's shuffle. Water laps. Stars spin. Somewhere beyond the reeds, a fisherman hums a tune about lost loves and found tilapia. Let tomorrow bring tax collectors, droughts, or another rogue eclipse. For now, there's only this, the earth's slow heartbeat, the whisper of roots drinking deep, and the unyielding truth that you planted your row. Rest, little gardener. The world spins on.